I'm Barbara Peters. Welcome to another episode in the Criminal Calendar. I have with me, I'm not going to say old, but a long-standing, and I hope dear friend, Nancy Pickard, who's been writing mysteries for how long?
20 years.
Lord, has it been?
It has been that long. I used to say that when I can say I've been doing something for 20 years, I'd have to be old by then. So now I'm saying I've written mysteries for 20 years. And I've been a professional writer for longer than that, for closer to for more than 30 years.
I didn't realize that you had a previous history as a writer before you wrote your first Jenny Kane, which was A Generous Death in when?
It came out in Christmas of 1983 on the same day that my son was born.
Really?
Yes.
A double birth.
Oh, it was amazing. I'm an only child. My parents had waited a long time for this child. I was 38. So they were waiting in the waiting room of the maternity ward, reading their only child's first book while awaiting the birth of their only grandchild.
That almost demands like a religious trip to church. That celebration.
It was almost too much to absorb at the time. That's so much emotion at one time. You know how it is. Just to get a book published is overwhelmingly wonderful, but then to have a healthy baby on top of that. And I'd waited a long time for both of these things. So it was quite a Christmas. And it was at Christmas.
Yeah, well, even that's what I was thinking. You could have a real nativity there all the way around. I guess we could assume you didn't tour to promote your first book.
No, I didn't. That's right. But it didn't take me long. I went to the first BoucherCon I could after that, BoucherCon being the mystery convention, and I went to one in San Francisco, just a shy beginning writer, and that's where I met Susan Dunlap and Julie Smith and other people who've become good friends over the years.
You were really caught up in that Sisters in Crime movement during the 1980s, weren't you?
I
When was
really
that
was.
actually formed, Nancy?
That was formed at, I believe it was a Minneapolis BoucherCon, and it was Sarah Paretsky who invited, there were 40 of us who showed up for a breakfast, and she had put out a wide invitation. It wasn't as if only a few people got invited, but 40 of us, editors, fans, booksellers, readers, writers, showed up for this breakfast, and Sarah had the idea of an organization to promote women writing mysteries and to overcome what we perceived as some of the handicaps facing women mystery writers at that time. And there was enormous enthusiasm in the room. And from that we formed an executive committee, and that was in place for, I think, a year, and then we started officially electing officers. So Sarah was the founding mother, and then I was the first president of Sisters in Crime.
I thought I remembered that. I didn't open the poison pen until 1989, so to some extent I came in the middle of that, and you all had done tremendous work. I know Julie Smith came and won the first Edgar that a woman had won for years. I don't think it was the first one ever, was it?
I don't think it was either, but they were few and far between.
Right, so that was, I think, a good sign that,
Yes.
that this was working. And then there was the year that Margaret Maron scooped all of the major mystery awards.
Oh, yes.
With her The Bootlegger's Daughter. Remember, she won an Agatha,
Yes.
an Anthony, a McCavity, and an Edgar.
A feat that no one else has repeated, and it may be that no one ever will repeat that feat. Around the time, too, just sometime after Sisters in Crime was formed, when it was perceived by a lot of women that it was virtually impossible for women to get an Edgar for Best Novel. This is before Julie won hers. That's when conventions such as the Malice Domestic Convention were formed, and new prizes started popping up. It was as if a lot of women, particularly women readers, were saying, well, if our favorite writers can't get awards the usual way, the old-fashioned way, we'll do it the new-fashioned way. We'll create awards of our own.
True, and Malice Domestic, for those of you who don't know, is it's called cozy crime, which I think is unfair. I would call it traditional crime.
Yes, I would too.
And it also is a place where historical mysteries are showcased because they fall into that. And they give an Agatha Award signified by a teapot.
Yes.
Whereas the Edgar Allan Poe Award gets the statue and so on and so forth. You know, it's interesting because when I opened the store, the Sisters in Crime movement was really underway, and in the first years that the bookstore was flourishing, there was sort of a perceived wisdom that you needed to be a woman to have a successful writing career. You know, the guys were all discouraged. What's happened in the last few years, though, is that really thrillers have become the predominant form because they're bigger books and they sell in larger numbers and all, and so the guys have kind of come back, I think, to, if not parity, dominance.
Yeah, the pendulum has swung a bit again, and no doubt will once more, but I do think the thing that's different now is that we all have a fighting chance.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Very much so, and there are some women looking to write in that bigger format. it's difficult, I think, for that sort of malice domestic mystery to do well today. You know, it isn't, the audience for it is not big enough to really drive the right number for a lot of the big New York publishers. But fortunately, there's a whole, which we won't go into, a whole small press movement that's kind of dealing
with that. Yeah,
that's kind of dealing with that. Well, you started in an auspicious way. Could we sort of review quickly for our readers before we get into things how many awards and what kind of recognition you've had? I always like to establish these credentials. I know that you have won at least one Agatha.
I've won 3 Agathas, 2 for novels and 1 for short story.
Okay.
So I have 3 teapots at home. I love my 3 teapots.
Wonderful.
Jill Churchill, who, as you know, is a writer of traditional mysteries, at one time lived about 1 block from me, and she had a teapot or 2 herself, so we figured we had more teapots in a single square block than any place else on the face of the earth.
In Kansas, middle country.
In Kansas, that's right,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
Middle Earth.
Middle Earth, indeed. All right, and you've been nominated for the Edgar Allan Poe Award 3 times, most recently, in fact, this year.
Yes, for The Whole Truth.
And I noticed that you've just come up on the screen for the McCavity Award, which is given by the Mystery Readers International Organization, its journal. But you've won earlier McCavities.
I have. I've won for a novel, Marriage is Murder, and then I won for a short story as well. One of my favorite awards, though, was for The Seamus. The first private eye short story I ever won for best short story that year, and I thought it was really generous of the private eye writers to give that to me because I killed, I think, 3 private eyes in that story.
Yes, they might have disqualified you. I tend to forget about the Seamus, but you're right, that's a really wonderful and valuable award. That's given by the Private Eye Writers of America as opposed to the Mystery Writers of America.
Yes. Now, some people look at all the awards that are given in the field and think, or may be tempted to think there are too many awards, but I'm here to tell you that there are not too many awards and that it's very helpful to a writer's career. And one of the ways in which it's the most helpful, I think, is writers are these poor, pitiful creatures sometimes who need all the encouragement they can get, and to be nominated for an award or to win an award can come just at the right time for a writer. I can think of a writer that I won't name at the moment, but someone who's recently been nominated for a couple of things, and she's overjoyed by this. It has come after a long, dry, difficult period, and it's wonderful to see her happiness at being nominated.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it literally inspires her to go home and write harder and write more. And for those of us who love the work of these writers, that's really good news. So I say keep those awards coming.
Well, you certainly have a staggering number, and I think that that's a real salute to your talents. And it's interesting that you have written 1 successful series about Jenny Kane, which has run to 10 books.
Yes.
You have started your new series, which, and certainly The Whole Truth has had tremendous acclaim with an Edgar and a McCavity. You have also written a lot of short stories, which we might get to, and then we'll diverge into Virginia Rich and all of that. But let's go back and talk a little bit about Jenny Kane. Where did all that come from?
Jenny Kane came, well, first of all, I'd have to say that like any novelist that I know of, I had to pay my dues and I had to serve an apprenticeship before I was published. There are many ways to serve an apprenticeship, and the way I served mine, I think, was through, about 13 years worth of freelance writing and other kinds of commercial writing, and I had a journalism degree. So when I turned to writing fiction full time, I had a compressed period of rejection. I had about 1.5 years of being rejected. And so my first novel was rejected by 9 very wise publishers in New York, to whom I will always be grateful. And then there was my second book, Generous Death, that was accepted for publication.
Was the first one a Jenny Kane, or was
No, it was based actually on a cruise I had gone on with my husband, a cruise in which 3 people died. And of course that was irresistible for a mystery writer. And I wrote a novel called Death Cruise. And it was really a bad novel. And but it got me an agent. I guess it wasn't that bad. And it got me some really valuable rejection letters. And then it was the experience I needed to prove to myself I could write a novel.